call Eugenia Sage.
Greetings to you, Mr. Speaker.
And to congratulate the new Speaker, Right Honourable David Carter. The Green Party remains strongly opposed to this bill, the Environment Canterbury Temporary Commissioners and Improved Water Management Bill. What a misdescription of a bill. We're opposed to it because it is undemocratic, it's contrary to the rule of law, and it weakens and undermines water conservation orders and the RMA in Canterbury. There was a very eloquent submission by the New Zealand Law Society's Rule of Law Committee presented by its chair, Austin Forbes. And that submission said, and I quote, "Democratic decision-making in local government is a very important and legitimate expectation of citizens. The proposed further suspension of local body democracy runs counter to core constitutional values, most importantly that of a free and democratic society." The Law Society said that the bill should not proceed. The Green Party agrees. If we didn't have this bill, Mr. Speaker, Environment Canterbury would be set to return to an elected governing body of regional councillors in the local elections in October. And regardless of what people thought of regional councillors in 2010, October 2013 should have been the chance for all Cantabrians to exercise their democratic right and elect councillors to determine and decide how the rates that those Cantabrians pay should be spent and how the land, water, air, coast, natural hazard in the region should be managed and how regional transport should be planned. That was what ministers promised in 2010. That was what was the understanding in this House when the 2010 Act was passed. So government has reneged on that commitment because it wants to reorganise local government in Canterbury, and the 10 mayors who wrote to the minister at the time may well regret that if there are proposals for a unitary authority as in Auckland. And the government also wants to continue with its hand-picked commissioners because it wants them to control and finalise the key statutory documents which will guide land and water management in Canterbury for the next decade. It's the Regional Land and Water Plan which will set the framework for decisions on water takes, for decisions on irrigation, for acceptable nitrate levels in aquifers and waterways, and will set the rules which control the extent to which dairying can expand and intensive land use can increase the pollution load. The government wants a weak land and water plan because it's desperate for more agricultural intensification, more irrigation and more dairying in Canterbury. It's desperate because of its failure to embrace smart green growth and have a smart plan for our future. Its economic agenda is stuck in the 19th century. It's stuck in resource exploitation, more mining, more drilling, more irrigation. And for Nikki Wagner to go on as a former regional councillor with the mistruths that the new minister has perpetuated, that Environment Canterbury did not have a plan, is inexcusable. ECAN had a natural resources regional plan, a proposed plan, which was notified in 2004. And it's this new regional land and water plan which is succeeding that as a second generation plan. And what do Cantabrians say about that plan? Well, we've had North Canterbury Fish and Games environmental officer, and he said, and I quote, "We have been presented with a weak and permissive plan that cannot effectively manage water resource decisions over the next 5 years." Mr. Speaker, hearings on that plan, which the commissioners have put out, begin in the next few weeks. That's why government wants them to stay, so it can ensure that the plan continues to have very weak rules to control agricultural intensification and irrigation. Because, Mr. Speaker, it was that was the genesis of the Substantive Act in 2010. Government wanted legislation that would favour irrigators. and it was under the 2010 Act that we have seen the Minister sign off the changes to the Rakaia Water Conservation Order, which allowed Trustpower to manipulate the flows in that magnificent river, the Rakaia, and promote much more extensive irrigation in conjunction with Central Plains Water. So we've had that scheme and the continued changes to water conservation orders continuing under this bill, when the official advice from the Ministry of Primary Industry, from the Ministry for the Environment and the Department of Internal Affairs was that there was insufficient justification for continuing those special water conservation order provisions. Cabinet rejected the advice of officials, and we still have now, under this bill, legislation in Canterbury, part of the RMA, which is completely different from that which applies in the rest of the country. And what did the ministers also do? They rejected the advice of their own commissioners for a mixed body of elected members and appointed commissioners. So, Mr. Speaker, the 2010 Act was rammed through under urgency with no opportunity for submissions. We have had submissions on this bill, and what have those submissions said? 90 of the 95 submissions opposed the bill. And it's interesting, those who favoured it. They were Irrigation New Zealand, the Waitaki Irrigators Collective and Federated Farmers, highlighting the way in which the bill serves their interests. And as Clayton Cosgrove mentioned, the Human Rights Commission noted that the bill has the potential, and I quote, to further exacerbate the resentment that has arisen in Canterbury as a result of autocratic decision-making. And that was a major theme that came through the submissions presented by Canterbury residents to the Select Committee in Christchurch. As Rosalie Schnoink of Glentunnel said, and I quote, the best people to represent us on ECAN are people elected by us, for us. And what have we seen with water management under the commissioners? Certainly the collaborative water management strategy has been rolled out, but that was developed by elected councillors, not by commissioners. They've rolled it out. And what's happening with water management? In Darfield, 150 people got sick because of an E. coli infection, bacteria being found in the community water supply. That's not the result of good water management. That's the result of poorly controlled agricultural intensification. Mr. Speaker, we need Cantabrians to be involved in decision making. We need to remove that sense of powerlessness that people are feeling with the autocratic way in which Sarah goes out making its decisions, with the lack of ability to have a real say on what Sarah's doing, and now with this legislation which tramples over local democracy. It further disempowers Cantabrians. And as the Law Society said, the bill was a disturbing breach of the rule of law. And that's because it removes access to the Environment Court for appeals on regional plans, and it sidesteps the Environment Court and that really specialist jurisdiction that the court has. And in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, this bill is totally consistent with the national government's changes to the Local Government Act, where it again erodes local democracy by increasing the ability of the minister to interfere and direct elected representatives to undermine their autonomy. So, Mr. Speaker, the Green Party opposes this bill. It's anti-democratic, it's a breach of the rule of law, and it undermines democracy.